To this Python tutorial series. Today we're on episode 7. Last episode, we were talking about conditional statements and if else statements, which are really important. So if you missed that, please go review it. If not, just stay here because today we are going to be talking about something called for loops. And for loops are probably my most favorite thing in Python because of all the things you could do with it and all the data you could manage and use in just one little function. And so I'm excited to explain to you guys what that is today because when I first started learning, I was really confused on it and I couldn't wrap my head around it. And after all this experience, I could explain it to you guys and hopefully you guys will understand it. And so for a for loop, there's two different types. And with both of them, all it's doing is it's going through a list of something. And so let me explain. So remember how I used to say like strings are a list of characters, a list is obviously a list of values or something like that. I've been saying that since episode 1 because of for loops and it helps you understand it a little bit better. So let me do something for example. So I'm going to go over the first type of for loop. So let's just make a regular string variable. So we'll just call it var equals hello world like that. And so obviously, as I've been saying, it's a list of characters from index 0 to however many at the end. And so how a for loop works is you start with for, and then you create a new variable for this for loop. So it could be anything. For uh test in, and then you say the actual variable or list of something that you're trying to go through. So for test, this thing you made up in var. And then you go through it in the for loop. And so what it basically is a for loop goes through a list starting from the first index to the last. So it's basically saying for each character, since we're talking about strings, for each character, do this. And so it's basically assigning a value to this variable test for each one. So the first part it goes through H and it does all the commands. And then once it's done, it goes to the next character and it makes test equal to E now. And so let me explain how this goes in further detail. If I just do for test in var print test. And so this is basically saying for each character in this list, print that one character. So it should be printing H, then E, then L, then L, then O, and then space until it's done. And so if we run it, just like that, it prints each character from the list. And that's basically it in essence how it is. And so it just goes through each list or each index of a list. It could be a string, it could be an actual list, and it assigns it into this variable. And then you could do anything with this variable. So we could use an actual list. We could use list variable and we could go equals to, we could go names. We could go Rico, Sam, John, Yogi, uh, that's my dog's name. You could do anything. You could go Maddie like that, and so you could have this list of variable names, right? And of names that are in a list. And so you could have the same variable. It could be any variable, but let's just say for name. It's a new variable name in list var. And so now instead of this one where it goes through a list or a list of characters, right? It goes through each character. Now it goes through each whole index. So it goes for this first index, this second index, this third index. You know what I'm talking about? And so it any variable in which you can index, just like a string, you could put in a for loop. It's just like a list, you could put it in a for loop. And for integers, you use the second type of for loop, which I'll explain later. But here you could go for name in list variable, print name, just like that. Where you go print name plus, and then you could add a string. They said hello. And so it's going to print Rico, they said hello. Sam, they said hello. John, they said hello. Yogi said they said hello. And then it goes through the whole list. And then once it's done, the for loop ends and it goes through the next thing. And that's the first part of the for loop. And with this, it's a lot like the second part, the second type of for loop, which I'm going to explain. Now, since this for loop indexes for like the variable, it makes this variable as a string, as anything, as a character. The second type of for loop is going to name the variable a number. So instead of name, for example, it's going to be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. It could be an index, it could be anything. So let me explain. So instead of for something in, it's going to look the exact same. So it's going to be, say, for, and then we'll just do number. You can name it anything in. So it's going to look the exact same, but now you use range. And this is a number range from this number to this number. And that's exactly what it seems. So if you're using numbers and you want to use, want to start from 0 to 10, for example, you could start from 0, comma 11. Because remember, you don't use this 11th, you go from 0 to 10. And then now you go print num. And then let's just take this out. We're not going to use this. Just like that. And so these for loops are the exact same. One just indexes through numbers, and one indexes through, you know, the values that you assign like this or by characters. And they could be used the exact same. And let me show you. So for num in range, and you could use the length of the list variable itself or the variable. So we could go for num in range length of list var. And the last one I used, it was 0, comma 11. You don't have to put the 0. You could just put a number and it'll automatically start from 0. And so now it's the length of the list variable. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So for num in range 5, from 0 to 5. And you could still print these values just like we did in the first type of for loop. So we could print the list var, and then inside the brackets you could put this value you made up. So it's basically saying print list var, and it's going to start at 0, print the 0 index of list variable, which is going to be Rico. And then it's the same way if you just go for name in list variable. So these two are going to be doing the exact same thing. One just parses it through the index number, and one just parses it through each value. Each way you could use differently. They're both used for different things, but you could use it for the same thing if you'd like. So I'm going to run it. It's going to say the same thing from Rico to Maddie, and then some from Rico to Maddie. It's going to do the exact same thing. One is just through a range of numbers, and the other is just through the values. And those are the two types of for loops that are used. I use these in all my codes ever since I started. This one would for loops were just harder for me to learn. I couldn't wrap my head around it until I finally figured it out, and I hope you guys are understanding it better than I did when I first started. But there's one more thing I want to show you that work in both types of for loops. It's called break, just like no, not breakpoint, break and continue, just like that. And so breaking is you could put conditional statements, you could put more commands in the for loop. So you could be like, if this one value equals this, continue or break. And what break does, just like this, is once it finds something or a condition is met or it runs break, the whole entire for loop is finished, right? So we could be like, so since we're using a range, if num is equal to, we could use a conditional statement. So if num is equal to 2, break, just like that. And then before we could print the number. So it's basically saying print the number, but if the number is equal to 2, break the statement. So it will completely stop this for loop and it'll go to this next line. Let me just take this part out right here. That's what break does. So print, it's going to print the first number, which is 0. It's going to print it. The 0 equal to no, so it's not going to break. It's going to do the same thing for 1. Does 1 equal 2? No, it's not going to break. 2, it's going to print 2, but 2 equals 2. So it's going to break, and it's not going to go to 3 or 4, right? It breaks the whole statement. But if we use continue, all continue does is it stops the rest of the code below it for that for loop, and it just continues it to the next index or the next value for the for loop. So we could go like print, we could go str of num was used. So we're going to say print number, if number equals 2, continue now and not break. And if it continues, it's not going to print this code. It's just going to go to the next iteration of this value. So let me explain when we run it. Just like that. So it's going to print 0. 0 does not equal 2, so it's not going to continue, and it's going to print 0 was used. Same thing with 1. And let's see, number 2 is going to be number 2, print 2. So it prints 2. If 2 equals 2, continue. So it's going to go to the next iteration. It's going to go to 3. But it's not going to go to this line of code. It's going to ignore the rest of these codes below it. And just going to skip it, go to the next iteration. So it goes to 3. 3 doesn't equal 2. It doesn't continue. It says 3 was used. And that's the difference between break and continue. Break completely stops the for loop when it's ran, and continue just goes to the next iteration of the for loop. And that's basically it for loops. It's a little confusing, but all you have to think about it is you're assigning a value to this variable that you made up, and that value keeps on changing based on a range of numbers or a list of something, a list of characters, a list of a value that you assign like this. It's going to go through either the index or it's going to go through each of the variables. And that's basically it for loops. You could keep, I'll make a quick example for you so you can understand more, but let's say this is our name variables, name list, right? Let's take this out like it's an actual project, right? So oops, for name in we don't have to use a range on this one. We'll just go for name in name list. So it's going to go through each of these values. So for Rico, for Sam, and we're going to be like, if name is equal to Yogi, print this is dog's name, a dog name. We'll just say a dog name, and then we'll break it, right? So let's just say like this is like an error for loop. It's going to look for names that shouldn't be there. And then if the name doesn't equal Yogi, we could be like print the we go print the name, we go plus, and then we go name, right? So the name is a human name, just like that. And or we could continue. Let's honestly, this will make more sense if we use continue because it's not going to say it's a human name, right? So it's just going to go over and it's not going to go through this uh, this line of code. It's going to go to the next iteration. So let's run it. The name Rico is a human name, right? So Rico's an actual name, a human name. So it goes to here. Sam, same thing. John, same thing. This is a dog name. So it goes to Yogi from John to Yogi. If name equals Yogi, this is a dog name, continue. So I don't want to deal with this code, right? Because we're continuing it, we're going to the next iteration. And the next iteration is Maddie. And if Maddie is equal to Yogi, it's not, so it doesn't do that. It doesn't even continue. It does this, and then it's finished. And that's how for loops work with breaks and continues. It's a little confusing. Just practice it on your own, but you'll get used to it if you just keep practicing. And that's basically it for episode 7. If you guys have any questions, just let me know in the comments down below. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you guys in episode 8.